Welcome to episode 055 of the Bit Beacon broadcast. It's October 7th, 2024. Kodax is here, that's me, and I'm flying solo today. Before I jump into what I've been playing, I did get something in the mail this past week, and I'd like to do a little bit of an unboxing with you all. So I've got here the Master Detectives Archive Master Detectives Archive. Oh my goodness, I'm getting this title completely wrong. Master Detective Archives Raincode Plus Lucid-Noir Limited Edition. So I've kind of torn the seal a little bit so I can easily take all of it off, but I'll give you a little bit of that plastic ASMR stuff going on here. Didn't that sound really nice? Okay, so I purchased this from Target. This game is from the creators of Danganronpa, specifically Kotaro Uchikoshi. He's kind of the mastermind behind those games, and this is his next kind of game in that sort of mystery murder genre. The box is kind of a tall rectangle. And it is all gray around except for the back panel, which kind of imitates a little bit more of a normal looking box art on the back. Unfortunately, Target didn't package my box super duper well, so the bottom of the box is kind of dented up in a couple of the corners, which is a little bit of a bummer. But the package itself is pretty nice. It has a really great illustration from the character designer / main illustrator for the game, who also happens to be the same one that did all the art for the Danganronpa games as well. I know his first name is Rui, R-U-I. I don't know if you pronounce it Rui, but that's how I pronounce it. So now that I've got the seal off, let's pop open the top and see what's in here. Oh man, it's one of those... You gotta bend the thing just right, otherwise you're gonna cause damage to the box. Had to pause for a moment there so I could get this open without totally tearing the box. Because Lord knows I like to protect my boxes. Okay, so let's start with the biggest item in here, which is a plushie, or as they're often called. A little plushy friend that can sit on your desk. And this is kind of the sort of mascot of this particular game. This is a Japanese game, by the way. So it's very Japanesey with, having a mascot style character and that kind of thing. And this is Shinigami, as it's known. Shinigami has two forms. Its first form is this kind of almost purple Casper looking thing. And then its alternate form is sort of this more human-looking character as well. I'm not sure. I haven't played this yet. It did originally release on the Switch last year, and I did cover my receipt of the Switch Limited Edition, but I chose not to play it there because I was expecting that the PlayStation 5 release was eventually going to come around, and it took more than a year later, but it's finally here. So that's why I'm opening this box, because I actually do want to play it. So yeah, the Shinigami plush, it actually looks really high quality. I'm impressed. Good job, Spike Chunsoft with that guy, Shinigami. Okay. The next thing we got here is a special Noise of Neon Master Detective Archives Raincode official soundtrack CD. So this is not really a full soundtrack. There's only 10 tracks on here. My understanding is that these tracks... No, okay, I think it's just 10 tracks from the game. I thought maybe it was like a remix soundtrack or something. I think I'm thinking of something else. But yeah, nice to see a soundtrack CD. The soundtrack is also composed by the same composer of the Danganronpa games, and that would be Masafumi Takada, or as I like to refer to him as Masafumi Tagada, because he's amazing and I love his music so much. Okay, the next item we have here is a steelbook. So this is the Master Detective Archives Raincode Plus steelbook. And I'm seeing here that it's got some scratches on mine, which is a little bit of a bummer. I wish they had individually wrapped it. But they didn't. They chose not to do that. But nothing too egregious, you know. Steelbooks are always going to have some minor imperfections on them, just by the nature of them being made of, like, you know, a soft metal tin. Anyway, so this steelbook is different from the steelbook that came with the Switch edition, not only in the size, but it actually has completely different art on the front. I believe this art was drawn specifically for the Plus version of the game. On the front, it's got some key art looking art, if I've ever seen it. It's got Shinigami in her humanoid form, but she's still a ghost. And then it has the protagonist, whose name is escaping me right now. Let's see if maybe it's on here on the back of the box. No, I'm not seeing the name of the character on the box. Okay, so yeah, steelbook is very nice. I like it a lot. Cool. And then, thankfully, it also comes with the game wrapped completely separately, which is awesome. A lot of times, the games, you know, when it comes to the steelbook, the game is just in the steelbook and you don't get the traditional copy of the game as well. Well, this time we do. We do get the actual retail copy. It is not a not-for-resale copy. So this is the same one that you would find in stores. That's kind of a relief. Now, all first print copies of the game on PS4 come with a mini novel inside the game case. So let's check out what that looks like. Alright, got the shrink wrap off. So there's a special sticker that they have applied, not to the shrink wrap, but to the game case itself, which I kind of like, because a lot of times when there's those stickers on the shrink wrap, I want to keep the sticker. So I end up like kind of cutting it off the shrink wrap and then I tuck it inside the game case so I have it. I know that's really weird, but that's what I do when we have those little stickers on the games. So it's nice that it's actually stuck to the game case itself. So it says includes printed novel. So I'm going to guess that if you are looking for this game, you see it in the store and you don't see that sticker, rather than the game having like a special Day 1 edition banner printed on top of the game cover, which I'm not really a big fan of personally, there's just a sticker on the outer case, and that'll let you know if you're buying a first print copy or not that has the mini novel inside of it. Alright, so the mini novel, I've got it here in my hand. It's more of a... it feels like it's a manual, you know, in terms of like when you pull it out and the actual feel. It's not hardcover. Obviously, it'd be kind of hard to get a hardcover thing in there. But it is titled How to Be a Master Detective, a Halara Nightmare Case. I'm guessing Halara is one of the master detectives found in the game. So the author is Takekuni Kitayama, and it's supervised by Kazutaka Kodaka. So yeah, it looks pretty, the font, I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty small. So you do have, let's see here, does it say how many pages? 27 pages of novel to read here, which is pretty cool. So something to look forward to if you are a fan of the game. Originally on Switch, there's a new original story included with the PlayStation 5 version first print run bonus. There's also some weird pages in here. I don't know if I'm supposed to like wear special glasses or something to see what's going on in here, but there's definitely some some fun stuff going on here. And at the back, it does actually have a little bit of... It does not have an ISBN number, for anyone wanting this novel, but it does have like a first edition. It does say things like that. Okay, interesting. Cool. So the interior of the game case, or the interior art of the disc, or the cover of the game, there is some interior art. It looks to be showing I believe the city, kind of a big cityscape that the game takes place in. And then the art of the disc itself looks pretty nice. It's got a bunch of scary looking ghost cubes floating around in purple. Yeah, ghost cubes. Okay, so that, I believe, is the entirety of the contents of the Code Lucid-Noir Limited Edition. Alright, so what have I been playing? I have been continuing my playthrough of Reynatis, and I have completed the game as of this Saturday. I kind of did like a crazy power session. Not only did I finish the game, I platinumed the game as well. 2.1% completion rate as of my last check yesterday. So it's still early days though. I do suspect that number will probably go up a bit because it's not an insanely hard platinum by any means. There was only one thing that was really tricky, but with some tips that I found on YouTube, I was able to get through it. But I want to talk about the game, and I actually have some notes this time. So last week, I was kind of complaining that the game wasn't overly challenging. Well, that kind of changed as I got into the mid-game. The game did get a bit more difficult for me, which I appreciated, but some of it felt a little gimmicky and cheap. With this one boss in particular, without spoiling it too much, he's like this old man working in a factory, and his battle was just had some real cheap shot kind of stuff going on in it that I was like, what the heck? What am I even supposed to do here, you know? But I did eventually get through that boss after a few tries. And then the game got laughably easy as I got to the last few chapters of the game. I figured out one of the characters has this crazy ability that they can use that like shoots lightning bolts out of his guns, and it has like a chain lightning effect where it'll bounce around from enemy to enemy, and it just does so much damage. And with the right equipment attached, you can boost that damage even higher. So I was basically just destroying the last few bosses in the game without any semblance of any challenge whatsoever, which felt kind of bad. Yeah, that's probably my own fault. I didn't have to do that, but I did. As for the story, it did get even more intriguing as it went on. It does seemingly leave in a place that sets up for a sequel of sorts. So I'm very, very curious to see how they go forward. Interestingly, while I was playing the game this past week, it received an update. I think it was on October 1st or October 2nd. And this update added a post-game Chapter 34. The game ends with Chapter 33, but Chapter 34 picks up not long after Chapter 33, and it adds a new super boss to the game effectively. I could not beat it. I spent about half an hour trying to do it. You're only allowed to use one character, and you can't use the character who's really overpowered. You have to use kind of like the main protagonist of the game, or one of the two main protagonists of the game. Marin, that's the main protagonist's name. And yeah, I just couldn't do it. So I ended up looking up a video on YouTube to see what happens. Definitely adds, it almost acts like an epilogue, I guess you could say, to the game, where it adds even more intriguing stuff going on. It gives me a whole bunch of questions. Again, it reminds me so much of Kingdom Hearts, where they have these like videos after you beat the super boss that are just like, what? Huh? What's going on? And then yeah, so and then it teases a tease that was originally teased in the main ending of the game before the credits roll. even harder. So yeah, I really think they're setting up for a sequel. Obviously, it's going to depend greatly on if players, resonate with the game, if it sells particularly well or not, if a sequel comes out. But given the low budget nature of the game, I don't expect that they need, a zillion sales. They're probably happy with 100,000 or something like that. So I don't know, Reynatis 2, maybe that's a thing that comes out. Oh, and they do explain the title. For the longest time I was playing the game and I'm like, what the heck is Reynatis? And then that word comes up in the game and they do define it. So I appreciated that it wasn't just some gibberish name for the sake of being a gibberish name. It did have a meaning. Okay, so I don't got any events to talk about, so I'm just going to jump straight into the news from here. So earlier this year, Nintendo controversially had the popular Nintendo Switch emulator Yuzu removed from being available. The creators of Yuzu, Team Tropical Haze, ultimately settled with Nintendo and agreed to pay $2.4 million in damages for, I guess, basically distributing this software which Nintendo deemed violated a bunch of various things. Emulators are protected as long as they are not made with a company's like technology, and it turns out maybe Yuzu sort of violated some of those things. So we covered this back on the BitBeacon broadcast earlier this year. But unfortunately for people trying to emulate Nintendo Switch games on their computer, Nintendo's back. And this time they're going after the other major Switch emulator, and that would be Ryu Jinx. Ryu Jinx, like Ryu from Street Fighter and Jinx from Pokemon combined. Ryu Jinx. Ryu Jinx suddenly became unavailable on GitHub, where its repository was held a few days ago. Ryujinx creator GDK-chan was nowhere to be seen. Hours after the confusion, actually I think it was about a day later, a notice was posted on the Ryujinx Discord channel. So I believe this comes from one of the moderators, not from GDK-chan, who was kind of totally MIA in all of this. So this mod said, GDK-chan was contacted by Nintendo and offered an agreement to stop working on the project, remove the organization and all related assets he's in control of. While awaiting confirmation whether he would take this agreement, the organization has been removed. So I think it's safe to say what the outcome is. Rather than leave you with only panic and speculation, I decided to write this short message to give some closure. So after this statement went out, a bunch of people were like, what do you mean an agreement with Nintendo? People were suspecting that GDK-chan was like paid off by Nintendo to stop, or maybe offered some kind of role with Nintendo. Nobody really knew what was going on, and so people were kind of turning against him, like, wow, what a total turncoat. So the same moderator that issued that earlier statement kind of clarified his statements as to what this agreement was. Maybe they shouldn't have chosen the word agreement, which is kind of not really the right word for the situation, but here's what they said. This shouldn't need saying, but apparently it does. GDK-chan's agreement can't have been in any way beneficial to him. This was clearly a threat. Thinking about it for any amount of time should have made that obvious. His efforts behind the vast majority of the emulator's greatest accomplishments, its entire existence in the first place, and a big part of most of those unreleased features posted above. So with Ryujinx and Yuzu now out of the picture, there are only a handful of smaller and less fleshed out Switch emulators out there, and Nintendo's probably thinking about how to approach them next. It's probably not a great idea if you're like an emulator person or someone that likes to make emulators to emulate anything regarding a console that Nintendo is still actively developing for and supporting currently. Like, if someone made a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series emulator for PC, which just really isn't possible right now, but if they were able to do that, you can be sure that Sony and Microsoft would be going after them extra hard. Like, there's really absolutely no reason to be doing it when the hardware is still available. Now, I get people being like, well, the Switch games run like crap. If I run them on my PC, they look a lot better. They run at 60 frames per second. I mean, I get that. And I'm not saying it's not within your right to emulate it, But unfortunately, as we've learned, these emulators aren't as on the up and up as people would like to believe they are. Now, it's interesting that Ryujinx probably, or the creator of Ryujinx, probably isn't going to suffer any monetary damages from Nintendo. Apparently, they just accepted Nintendo's first threat of like, hey, we're going to come after you unless you stop. And so he stopped. And I don't blame him. After seeing what happened to Yuzu, losing $2.5 million, $2.4 million, where do you come up with that? Even if you're some fancy software engineer pulling in $300K a year, $2.4 million is still a lot of money. So, I don't blame GDK-chan. He did what he had to do to protect himself, his family, his friends, whatever. And he got out. So it's not all bad news here at the Beacon broadcast. Every now and then we get something cool to talk about. Something fun, something refreshing, something happy. And today we're talking about a new studio that was formed, Day 4 Night. And that's like the word day, the number 4, and the word night. So this studio is founded by Mario plus Rabbids creative director David Soliani. He's French, so my apologies. And Red Dead Redemption lead designer Christian Cantamessa. Day for Night has received funding for an entirely original game from One Up Ventures and Krafton. So their new studio gets announced, and it's kicking off immediately with a big round of funding from One Up Ventures, who is founded by former Xbox creator, whose name I cannot remember right now, and Krafton. So both of these companies, they find games to invest in. Krafton, I think, actually publishes games. One Up Ventures, I don't think they do anything like that. I met David back in 2018 at E3 after he finished his Mario plus Rabbids presentation on Nintendo's live stage. I kind of was looking at the schedule and sort of pre-planned or tried to engineer a meet with him, and sure enough, it worked out. He signed my copy of Mario plus Rabbids, and that was, pretty cool. Many people know him as the crying Ubisoft man from Ubisoft's 2017 live show where Mario plus Rabbids was unveiled. Miyamoto was there on stage, and David was in the audience, and I guess David was like so moved by like Miyamoto being there, like demoing and presenting his game to the world, that he started like bawling tears, and like the camera like zoomed up on him, like crying, my daddy Miyamoto is here. Anyway, so he was memed for quite a while, still is, but honestly a very sweet guy, as far as I can tell. Now, David, after the first Mario and Rabbids game, they made a sequel that came out, I want to say 2 years ago, in 2020, either early 2023 or early 2022 or spring 2022, something like that. And for whatever reason, the game just kind of sold okay. I think the first Mario plus Rabbids game was kind of a novelty in a lot of ways. And, so a lot of people came to it. It especially helped that it launched like the same year that the Nintendo Switch launched. So people were really hungry for games. But in 2023 or 2022, people were already kind of like in I'm ready for Switch 2 mode. People weren't really like as clamoring for a game, and by all accounts the game was very well received, very well reviewed. People who played it really love it. It's a tactical style game, so if you're a fan of that kind of stuff, it's worth checking out. But I think some people were turned off a little bit by the fact that the game wasn't set in like Mario areas, Mario worlds anymore. It was instead set in like a new original kind of place, so the enemies weren't like Mario enemies and things like that. So I think there was less of an emphasis on the Mario and more of an emphasis on the Rabbids Ubisoft kind of side of things. And I remember there was comments from Ubisoft basically saying that they kind of blamed the lack of sales on there not being like a new hardware to give it to. And maybe the plan was originally for that game to launch on some sort of Switch Plus or the Switch successor, and that never manifested, and we're still to this day waiting to hear from Nintendo about a proper Switch successor. All they've confirmed was that it exists, and it'll be here in less than a year. That's all we know so far. Strong rumors that if the Switch 2 isn't unveiled in this month of October, that we will not hear from it in November or December, and we will likely need to be waiting until January or February to hear about the new console. So Christian, they both of them issued a statement on kind of the announcement of the studio, and so I'm just going to read their brief statements here. So Christian Cantamessa, it's probably a little more simpler to say than that, but that's how I'm going to say it. When I first fell in love with video games at the start of my career, I saw the power of this new medium to tell stories never told before and create worlds that could transform people. Day for Night is a return to that innovative spirit, to that innocence, to that unbridled creativity. David said, "What we are creating at Day for Night is a reflection of everything I've ever wanted to experience as a player: joy, adventure, poetry, action, wonder, and the pleasure of working with friends. It's a lullaby for my soul and a serenade to our industry, to the magic and the madness of creating worlds from nothing. It's a story about triumphs, challenges, dreams, to light the path we walk together." So that's a lot of words. You can see he's very in touch with his emotion. That David likes to cry. He likes poetry, and he likes to be very flowery with his words. So they are joined by 3 other Ubisoft veterans as studio co-founders. That's Cristina Nava, Gianmarco Zana, and Luca Breda. Krafton and One Up Ventures also joined in on issuing their own statements. So Krafton said, "Day for Night's pitch presented a highly engaging and captivating story. The game's vision stands out as both original and creative, making it a great match for the type of studios we aim to support at Krafton. It aligns well with our mission, to scale up the creative." That's in quotes at the end there. And then One Up Ventures said, "When you see a lot of pitches like we do, it's always incredibly fun when you get to hear an idea that's completely new and original. This was easily the most creative thing we have seen in quite some time." So given the pedigree of these founders and the high words of praise from the investors, alongside the fact that it's so incredibly challenging to get funding for games today. We've talked about stories before where games have had to get shelved, studios have had to close down because either funding backed out or they just can't find funding anywhere at all. People are being very picky and selective when it comes to investing in studios and games right now. So, but just judging by everything I'm reading, I know it's all basically concept at this point, probably. It sounds like it's going to be an interesting game, I think. So I'm definitely going to be keeping my eyes on Day for Night, and I really do wish them all the best. But, out of those 5 people, 4 of them were Ubisoft people. So why did those people just leave Ubisoft and form a new studio? Well, it might be that Ubisoft is in trouble for a variety of reasons. In the last couple of years, Ubisoft faced a major reckoning as piles of harassment complaints spilled outside of the company walls and became public knowledge. Ubisoft promised internal change, that they would do better going forward. Some of the abusers were separated from the company, and some seemingly still have jobs there. Some of the abusers, such as Rayman creator Michel Ancel, I believe it's either Michel or Michael, I really don't know how they pronounce that stuff in Quebec or France or wherever they're at. They left the studio of their own accord when they saw the writing on the wall, though Ancel denies the claims against him. Seeing Michel Ancel kind of have, not that he was like a sexual predator or anything of that nature, but just that he had a temper, is what it sounds like, and he was known to yell and be maybe a little angry at times. But I'm a big fan of his games. The early Rayman games are really something special, and I know people love him for Beyond Good and Evil. Unfortunately, he was never able to make Beyond Good and Evil 2, although Ubisoft is apparently still working on that game after his departure even. So eventually, all of that hubbub quieted down, I believe back in 2022, and Ubisoft got back to work on a few very big games. The first of which just launched 2 months ago, Star Wars Outlaws, which by all accounts is a great game. It reviewed decently, and most reasonable people seem to be saying nice things about the game. I believe Ben, right now, Nintendo Boy 88, is playing it, and I hope once he's finished he'll come and share his thoughts on the game overall. But for various reasons, which include the game being labeled as woke for having a female protagonist with some skin color, bugs and glitches at launch, general Star Wars fatigue from the public, the game has not sold nearly as well as anticipated. A recent report says the game has only just crossed 1 million copies sold. For most games, this would be an incredible number, but for a licensed Disney game, these numbers are bad. So Ubisoft comes to Disney and says, hey, we want to make a Star Wars game. Because it's got the Star Wars IP, it's going to sell 10 times as much as a brand new IP that we create from scratch ourselves, right? So Disney says, okay, sure, this sounds like a great game. I like your pitch. We're going to need 30% of all revenue. So all that work you guys do, all we did was give you the license to use Star Wars stuff, and we get 30% of the money. Now, I don't know that those are the actual terms, but that's just me kind of guessing. So remember, Ubisoft gives 30% of the revenue to Disney, right? And then all the platform distributors where the game can be purchased at, they all take their 10% cut, their 5% cut, their 15% cut. And then Ubisoft is left with all this, which they didn't have to split, pay all the employees who made the game. And then what are they left with in terms of profit on a game that's probably taken them 4 or 5 years to develop? Probably nothing. They're probably in the red on this game for sure. Ubisoft is still committed to the game, though, and plans to continue to issue multiple updates for the game. I believe 2 updates in October, 1 in November, which they hope are going to kind of fix up some of the bugs, tune up the whole stealth mechanic that players are kind of iffy on, and get the game into a shape that both they can be happy and proud of, as well as gamers will enjoy too. The game will also be launching on Steam in November, with the culmination of one of the big updates that they're planning. I believe it also includes the first expansion or something like that to the game as well in November. So I think that has to do with some of it too. For whatever reason, I think Ubisoft, it was only available on PC via their Ubisoft launcher and maybe the Epic Games Store. But now it's coming to Steam, which is where most PC gamers are. So I think that will open up a new revenue stream for them. Part of me wonders if it's too little too late. Maybe it should have been available on PC Steam from day one, and that would have made a much larger impact, would have gotten to 1 million copies sold. Maybe they'd even be at like 1.25 million by now. But needless to say, the million number is bad. They were probably hoping for upwards of 5 million sales by this point. The next big game that I'm going to talk about is one that didn't even make its original release date. So Assassin's Creed Shadow was scheduled to come out later this month, but instead has now been delayed until February 14th, Valentine's Day, which I do find a little interesting. I do wonder if there's some kind of marketing angle they're going to go out there with the dual protagonist, Yasuke and Noe? I can't remember. Ubisoft says the game needs more time to cook and is looking to not have a repeat of Star Wars Outlaws' buggy launch. I mean, this is an Ubisoft game. No matter how, they could delay the game 2 years from now and it would still have bugs at launch. I almost always insist on playing an Ubisoft game like a year after it finishes, or a year after it's released. By then, it's a great game. If you buy an Ubisoft game and you play it at launch, you're just so likely to run into a lot of bugs and glitches. I used to be a day one Assassin's Creed player. I would be at the GameStop foaming at the mouth for the yearly release that we were getting that year, especially during the Ezio trilogy of games. And each year the games got progressively more and more buggy, culminating with that Assassin's Creed Unity, which was like the first major next-gen Assassin's Creed game for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. And that game was just a horrific mess at launch. I've heard it's in a good place now, but it left such a bad taste in my mouth. I will never play that game again. I won't go back to try to get the platinum trophy like I originally wanted to. I beat that game and I was like so eager to be done with it by the end of it. I just did not like that game. And from there I went on like a Ubisoft like break. I didn't touch any of their games at launch. I waited years before I finally picked up another Assassin's Creed game. I played Assassin's Creed Origins almost 2 years ago now. And that game kind of got me back into the series. I'm not like in a way where I've devoured everything since then, but and then I played Syndicate earlier this year, going back even further to one of the games shortly after Unity that I missed. So I'm open to the series again, but I'm definitely Unity still left like a really bad taste in my mouth and kind of scared me away from Ubisoft products. So it just goes to show you how like you can only mess with people so many times before they're like, okay, Ubisoft, I'm done eating what you're serving. So what's the result of they don't want a repeat of the buggy launch that Star Wars had. Insiders are reporting that they're looking to make small changes to the game to better represent the culture and history of Japan as a response to the criticism of its playable character Yasuke. This is something Ravenheart and I discussed earlier this year. Ravenheart is this historical figure in Japanese history. He was an African person brought to Japan by like some monks or something like that, and turns out he was kind of found very interesting by, I believe, Nobunaga. Was a major character in Japanese history. And then there's not a whole lot else known about Yasuke. So Assassin's Creed is looking to flesh that out in a fictional way by making him one of the protagonists of this game. But not everyone has really taken kindly to Yasuke being a playable character in Japan. People are upset. I don't know that there's many Japanese people that are upset, but there are definitely a lot of people in the Western English-speaking territories that are upset about Yasuke. Much like with Star Wars Outlaws being criticized as being woke, Assassin's Creed Shadow is also kind of getting that same criticism by having one of the two protagonists not be Japanese and be an African person. So, I don't know. I mean, Rick and I kind of came to the conclusion like, hey, he's a real historical figure. He was in Japan during this time. If you're making a game that's historical fiction, then why not use that character? He's ripe for interpretation and, not exfoliating, but elaborating on. So, what's the result of all of these failures? I haven't even mentioned they had their other AAA pirate game, Skull and Bones, came out earlier this year and bombed massively as well. Ubisoft shares have fallen more than 60% over the past year. To a low, last week they were $2.21 a share. 2 years ago, they were like $23 or something like that. That's crazy. They have completely cratered. And now Ubisoft's founders and the majority stakeholder, the Guillemot family, Guillemot, Guillemot family, and are contemplating teaming up with Chinese firm Tencent, which is not a good sign, to take the company private. Tencent already owns 10%. Whoa, how crazy. Tencent owns 10% of Ubisoft shares, so they became the most logical partner for the Guillemot family. So, the two of them together, I think they almost have like 33% total. And it's funny, the Gumal family also runs Ubisoft. The president for the long, long time has been Yves, Yves. I don't know how you pronounce his name. I'm sorry. So upon news of the potential buyout, shares jumped 33% to just over $3. And I believe that was last Thursday or Friday. And since then, shares have already kind of come back down to the mid $2 range. So nothing to get too excited about. But if you had invested at that $2.21 and then you sold it when it jumped over $3, hey, you could have made some change, some quick bucks real quick. Since then, Ubisoft has said news of the buyout is premature and that many options are being considered to stabilize the company. So the question I have, is there anything that can actually really be done? Is taking the company private just going to magically fix all of its problems? It's clear to me that Ubisoft in its current form is unsustainable. With over 19,000 employees worldwide and multiple flops this year, even if the company is taken private, I think more than just that's going to have to happen. They're going to have to reboot this. I fear that a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. My suggestion, though, is to start with the people at the top who have been running the company into the ground for the past few years. End transmission.